So grew up right on the river and know how important water is to our lifestyle, to our life, and how important it is to protect. I was honored to serve under Tom O'Halloran when he was chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. It was a great committee. We learned so much. And you know, natural resources and protecting our resources are not partisan issues. And Tom and I worked really well together. And so I'm very happy again to be here today, to be able to give you that kind of update. And I wanted to leave ample time to answer any questions that you might have. And so I know that there are particular issues on your mind. One of the things that we were able to do in addition to the fossil creek protection was the National Scenic Area legislation. And we almost got it done, didn't we, Angela? Almost. We're working on that again, meeting with the stakeholders, met with Tom, Keep Sedona Beautiful, talking with various people about the right way to move that forward one more time. And you know that that's so important to protect the red rocks, and that's one of the ways we can do that, by making it a national scenic area. And that brings economic development to the Sedona area, to the Verde Valley. We are able to protect our resources, then we are able to attract tourism. And that's part of our economic development. Now I have a vision for the state of Arizona, which is a diversified, stable economy built on multiple sectors. Tourism is one of them. But we've also got to bring in other opportunities, economic opportunities, and we have a great chance with emerging technologies like wind, solar, and that is an opportunity that, again, to show some real leadership in alternative energy creation. But it's more than just making new energy with wind and solar. It's also bringing back a manufacturing base so that we're making the components that go into the wind turbines here. We're making the components that go into the solar panels here. Another way that we can diversify our economic economy. And so I look forward to your ideas about how we can move forward. I will open it up for questions, thoughts, comments that you would like to address to me, and then I'll leave you with one closing thought. Sequestration, how's that going to affect us in northern Arizona? I'm really concerned about it. It looks like it is going to happen. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to prevent that from happening. And so last week I had my staff put together exactly that, the impact that it's going to have on Congressional District 1. The biggest impact is going to be on education. That's where we're going to take the biggest hit. Because, you know, in this congressional district, over 95% of the land is state or federal land. And so we rely on federal education funds for our schools. And that's going to get cut. So Title I, Head Start, all those school programs that we really rely on, that's what's going to get hit hardest. Now, I'm on Veteran Services, so I'm very concerned about what sequestration is going to do to our veterans. So we were just meeting yesterday with some of the veterans over in the Sholo area to talk about that, because they still have critical health care needs. Access to health care is still an issue in many of our small towns. These are things that we can't afford to cut. So rather than sequestration, what I wish we were doing is talking the way Tom and I used to about common sense places that we can cut, but education's not it. And you know, when you think again about economic development and the future of Arizona, we've got to have good schools, we've got to have an educated workforce. We can't afford those kinds of cuts. It's very disappointing to me that Congress has not been able to figure this out. And in fact, last week I voted against coming back here this week because I think we should be there working on this. It's too critical. So that said, you know, it's not going to be a pretty picture. It just isn't. So
does it affect our national parks and forests too?
It could. The question was, does it affect our national parks and forests? It could, if they have to close the forest. And so I was talking in Washington, D.C. with some of the people who were there when they closed the government down in the 90s. And what happened is, for instance, the Smithsonian museums closed because they didn't have the personnel to stay open. Now, I have heard that the superintendent at the Grand Canyon has made a contingency plan to keep the Grand Canyon open. And we're going to be meeting with him soon to talk about that as well. But it could, the parks could shut down because they just don't have the personnel. And you know, they're talking about furloughs now for government employees. This affects our Air Force bases, Davis-Monthan and Luke Air Force Base. And so talking with folks there, they're really concerned because they know that they're going to be losing pay. They're going to not be able to work enough days. So, you know, the defense contracts, all of that is going to be affected. Did you hear the question? The question is there a possibility of reaching some kind of consensus on how we protect the upper Verde? And I do. I always think there is a possibility. And, you know, bringing the parties to the table and starting to look for that common ground and building on that can be done. You know, we have a great model for that in this area called the Forest Restoration Project. Have you heard about that? It was a very much collaborative effort with the conservation groups, environmentalists, the chamber, the Forest Service, the timber industry, all came to the table and set aside their past differences, their past history, and said, this is really important to us. We have one goal, and that is to make our forests healthy and prevent horrific wildfire. And so they worked together, they were able to put together a plan, and it's moving along. So I know that there are models out there for doing it. Sure. You know, what do we want our land and resources to look like in 35 years, 50 years, 100 years? You know, those are the conversations we need to be having. Now, I will say that on transportation and infrastructure, that is one of the more bipartisan committees in Congress, and that's good. I think that we could do some major infrastructure projects. I hope that water resources is one of those that we address, especially here in the West. And one of the things that Tom O'Halloran taught me when I was in his committee was that water is a regional issue. So, you know, we have the upper basin, the lower basin, and all of that is tied together. And we really have to look at regional solutions. But we've got models about how to come together. There is a caucus in Congress called the Water Caucus for those Westerners primarily who are really concerned about how we will resolve our water issues moving forward.